Welcome back. I'm going to read chapter 5 in the book Julius again. This one is called Julius is Afraid of Storms. Mitch kept thinking about what Graham and Cassie had said. Mom and Mr. Dewey were spending a lot of time together, and he might end up with a stepfather. It wasn't that he didn't like Mr. Dewey, he did, but if things changed, life might not be so great anymore. One afternoon, a thunderstorm broke loose with the fury of a trainload of dynamite. Did you hear that? A thunderstorm broke loose with the fury of a trainload of dynamite. That's close enough to almost scare me, Mom said as they watched out the window. Lightning kept lighting up the entire neighborhood. The heavy crashes followed so close that Mitch knew the storm was almost upon them. I'm going to look out the door to make sure I put my bike in the garage, he told Mom. When he opened the door, he felt something brush his face, then saw Julius leaving the porch. Julius, Mitch screamed. You get back here. That racket will scare you out of the country. Julius kept going. Mitch called a dozen more times, but Julius didn't come back. Finally, he closed the door. What are we going to do about Julius? He asked Mom. She shook her dark head. I'm not sure. This will scare him a lot, but you can't make him come back. He can fly and you can't. Besides, it's very dangerous for you to be out in a thunderstorm. She gave Mitch a mini hug. Julius getting himself into that mess reminds me of how we do the same thing. God wants to protect us, but we take off on our own. She grinned, just like a dumb bird. Let's pop some corn and play a game of Yahtzee. He'll be back before we finish. The storm ended, but Julius didn't come. Mitch's bedtime did. Go on to bed, Mitch, Mom said. You know he'll be back, so you shouldn't worry. Mitch yawned, but he'll have to sleep outside if I'm in bed. May I take my sleeping bag out to the swing and sleep there until he comes? Mom hesitated, then agreed. The next time Mitch opened his eyes, he could see the shadowy shapes of trees and Julius sitting on his chest. Mitch started to get up and take Julius into the house when he noticed Julius had something in his beak. He took it and held out his arm. The big bird hopped on and Mitch deposited him in his large cage. Mitch walked off to the tune of Julius's quiet twittering. Mitch grinned. With the sounds Julius could make, he was everything from a doorbell to a tiny little bird. Mitch stepped into the living room and turned on a lamp so he could see what Julius had brought home. Snowy white, trimmed with bright red, 2 seconds later he recognized a cloth baby shoe, almost new. Mitch wondered how soon the owner would be there yelling at him. That evening, Mr. Dewey showed up for supper. Probably Mom invited him. Mom fixed a company meal, which Mitch enjoyed, even though Mr. Dewey's presence bothered him some. After they finished eating, Mitch showed them the baby shoe, wondering what to do about it. You could take it around the houses in the neighborhood, Mr. Dewey said. That sounded like a lot of work to Mitch, embarrassing too, but he decided he'd do it. Before he left, the doorbell rang. Not Julius, but the real doorbell. An upset-looking young woman stood on the porch. I'm sorry to bother you, she said. I've been all over the neighborhood looking for my baby's shoe. I thought maybe she lost it while I pushed her past here in her stroller yesterday. Mitch grinned all over his face. Is it white and red? The woman's face transformed from worry to joy. You found it, she said, almost laughing. Mitch got the shoe and the woman went away, thanking him over and over. Was I dishonest not to tell her about Julius? Mitch asked Mom and Mr. Dewey. Not a bit, Mr. Dewey said. You didn't tell her anything at all and you made her happy. For all you know, she did lose it. And Julius found it on the sidewalk, Mr. Dewey grinned. He's your pet, Mitch. Give him a little credit, okay? Mitch went into his bedroom to go over his spelling words for tomorrow. His teacher told him he should be getting A's every time. He knew all the words except 2, so he worked on those 2 for 10 minutes and put his book away. Hearing voices in the living room reminded him of Mom and Mr. Dewey. What was happening anyway? Please, Father, he said out loud, don't let something happen to ruin our lives. I know you love us and want the best for us. Thank you. When he walked into the living room, Mr. Dewey and Mom pulled apart from a kiss. Mitch felt a dark curtain slammed down in his head. Everything looked as dark as it had from the swing last night after the storm. He started to turn around and go back to his room. Before he turned, a big green bird landed on top of Mr. Dewey's head. Mitch almost wished he'd pull Mr. Dewey's hair out. But Julius let out a sound that made Mitch cringe even as far away as he was. "Awk, awk, awk," the bright bird screamed. He jumped up and down, spread his green wings, then repeated himself, "Awk, awk, awk," at about 1,000,000,000 decibels. He jumped and repeated his squawk several more times before Mom came to her senses. "Mitch," she screamed between Julius's squawks. Mitch ran to the kitchen for some dates, then back to Julius and Mr. Dewey. "Here, Julius," he said quietly, holding out the luscious fruit. Julius fluffed out his wings and opened his mouth for another series of squawks. Without even thinking, Mitch shoved the date in. Julius's eyes opened wide in surprise. He hiccuped, then ate the date. Mitch reached a wrist up to Mr. Dewey's head, where Julius still sat. "Come, Julius," he said as calmly as he could. Julius hopped on, then on down to Mitch's shoulder. A moment later, he snuggled close to Mitch's face, whispering his "k-k-k-k-k-k-k-k-k-k-k." When he gave Mitch's lips a few tweaks, Mitch moved to the bedroom. Julius jumped into his cage. Mitch retraced his steps to the living room, expecting to find his mom and Mr. Dewey still standing where he left them, scared to death. But he found them sitting on the couch, laughing together. "That bird sounded exactly like he did the first night we had him," Mom said. "I thought that stuff was history." "I did too," Mitch agreed. "He must have been really upset about something." Then he remembered Mom and Mr. Dewey's kiss. "I hope he's the only one upset," Mom said. "Yes," Mr. Dewey said, "because we have something to tell you. We want you to consider it the greatest news ever because that's what it's going to be to you." Mom smiled almost shyly. "Come sit beside me, Mitch." Mitch didn't want to, but he did. "Dan and I have decided to be married," she said quietly as soon as he settled. "Our home's going to be happier than it ever has." All right, that's the end of chapter 5.